Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am pleased to rise in the House today, and I want to thank the member opposite for his remarks. And I was listening attentively to the Minister of Environment, Parks and Conservation about some of the plans we have, tangible plans in order to help the environment here in Ontario. And that was why it was so important to communicate to Ontarians that we are creating a Made in Ontario plan, a plan that actually helps not just all of Ontario, but for the most part, we're carrying the most of the load for the entire country of Canada. If you look at how much we've reduced greenhouse gas emissions and how far Ontario has got, we have quite the legacy we have sent to all of Ontario. So we have a very proud legacy here in Ontario, whether it's the Living Legacy Fund, whether it's reducing the vast majority of greenhouse gas emissions, getting us on to a stable target to reduce our global greenhouse gas emissions. That's right. As of 2013, there's some to state the facts. As of 2013, Canada is responsible for 1.6% of greenhouse gas emissions. Ontario is responsible for less than 0.4% of those global emissions. And in fact, because of Ontario's leadership, we're actually on track to reaching our Paris Accord targets. And so what are some of those tangible things to talk about? Well, when we ran for the last election, it was a lot about affordability. How do we restore affordability in Ontario, but also empower Ontarians and empower Ontarians in what they can do for their local environment and help residents in their own backyard and be proud Ontarians. And so in our platform, we had put a stake in the ground. We had mentioned the environment in our platform. We had mentioned things like the Emission Reductions Fund. We had mentioned things like we really have to tackle things like litter by establishing a National Day of Litter. We talked about in our platform how we have to be responsible for clean drinking water, make sure we have clean water, clean air, and clean land. And Madam Speaker, not only did we mention that on our platform, but our last budget that we had just introduced. But it was interesting to note when I was running to be the representative for Barrie Innisfil, and my constituent had asked me, well, your platform mentions climate change. What about your opposition members who are running against you? And as someone who had read the NDP budget, and I mention this often because I did read their NDP platform, I was surprised to see that in their platform they mentioned climate change. You know how many times, Madam Speaker? Zero times. And so it was very surprising. In fact, global warming was only mentioned. Wait for it, Madam Speaker. 0 times, and adaptation was only mentioned in it. Wait for it, Madam Speaker. 0 times. And so, when it comes to action on climate change and combating climate change, I urge everyone to read our Made in Ontario Environment Plan because it establishes a balanced approach. Not only how do we create our clean water, clean air, and clean land, but it's a balanced approach of our economy and both our environment. Things that people can do. When I talk to student groups in my local riding, they often ask, what are things that I can mitigate, get ready for, whether it's the rainfall we're currently getting, and it's important to educate individuals. So if the members opposite had read our platform and if they were keen on resiliency, but in our environment plan, but yes, if they read our environment plan, they would see, unlike their platform where resiliency is only mentioned once, but the things that we mentioned were things like educating individuals on flooding in their basements, things that they can do to be prepared. And so I would highlight that to the members opposite. I'd also highlight the impacts of things like the carbon tax. We did mention in our Made in Ontario plan, a plan that we do mention climate change and resilience and the impacts many times. In fact, our environment plan, we do mention climate change 60 times, and our budget it's only over 70 times. And in our budget, they will note that we did talk about what matters most. We have a growing deficit in this province. The 4th item in our budget is the interest on the debt alone. Ontarians can't afford to pay more. So one of the things that we did mention in our budget in terms of protecting what matters most is our environment, Madam Speaker. On page 52 of our budget, we do mention the environment. And so we are mentioning it in every part of the way, not only just in our platform, in our Made in Ontario plan, but also in our budget. Why? Because we take the matter seriously, and we're offering constructive solutions that will help Ontarians get ahead while still supporting their environment. And the member from Kingston had mentioned some of his criticisms, but I would ask what the plan opposite would be, what their Made in Ontario plan would be, and what the member from Kingston would say to Queen's University in his riding, whose paying almost $2 million because of the carbon tax. What do you tell those professors, those teachers, and those students at Queen University, and how is your plan going to be helping them sustain the environment while paying this $2 million in the carbon tax alone? And that's just for the university, not talking about our hospitals. And that's the concern amongst Ontarians, is that when you are coming up with a plan that helps the environment, how are you mitigating those costs? What are your solutions? They often want to know what their solutions are. Well, I'll tell you what our solutions are, Madam Speaker. One of the things that I had the opportunity to go to with the Minister of Environment was the Great Lakes Guardians Council, where we spoke to members of the First Nations, the Métis, municipal leaders, academia was there, people from the agricultural sector, industry, environment, and conservation. And it's forums like this, Madam Speaker, it's forums like this that provide an important role in identifying priorities that we share. Priorities like helping our water quality and our ecosystems in the Great Lakes. And after 15 years of inaction and not monitoring the amount of sewer water that actually goes into our waterways, we're actually taking strong action. And we mentioned the action in our environmental plan about how we're going to get to the bottom of this, how we're going to be working with our communities. I was just in Thunder Bay. In fact, to be specific, I was in Red Rock on Friday announcing $17 million for their water treatment plant. Why? Because it's important to Lake Superior. It's important for their fish. It's important for the fish habitat. It's important for the entire ecosystem of the Thunder Bay area. And so when we say we're taking action, we're not just putting in words. We're codifying it in documents. We're making those announcements and delivering on clean water, delivering on clean air, and monitoring those situations and monitoring for what the proper solution should be, and looking at the science, Madam Speaker, the science, because I often hear a lot of criticisms, but no one actually looks at the science. And so one of the things we committed to in our environmental plan is working with the science community and actually identifying those things, and not just creating these models. You can model. I studied economics. You can model. You can have a model for whatever you want. If you want the model to say 5%, it's going to say 5%. But modeling and monitoring have to go hand in hand. Those are types of solutions and actions that are in our environmental plan. But these solutions aren't taxing people. And often I hear from people, oh, yes, you actually have an environmental plan. It's not a tax grab. It's not a tax plan, because you're not going to solve the environment by tax policy. You're going to solve the environment with environmental policy, and you're going to work with your various communities. And that's what we're doing, Madam Speaker. We're solving environmental issues by creating environmental policies, not tax policies. That's only going to add more red tape into our tax code. But if you don't take it from me, take it from other sectors that are going to that need the actual actions and solutions that are not the carbon tax. I have a local onion farmer in my riding. He contributes a lot to the community. He donates a lot to the community. He just recently put money towards a new health centre. He cares about the health and environment of his community. But he's being punished, Madam Speaker, by the carbon tax, and not only just the carbon tax, but the GST that's going to be put on the carbon tax for his onions, where he's trying to provide food security for not just Ontario, but he actually exports around the world, and this helps with their food security. So when the members opposite talk about, food policies and sustainability, well, you can't have that and be taxing all the farmers at the same time. So I often ask, what are your solutions if you want to have sustainable development, agriculture, sustainable food, but you also want to help the environment? What are your solutions? Because we're actually providing the solutions, and the solutions are things like getting rid of the cap and trade that put money back into Ontario's pockets, getting rid of the carbon tax, which is going to put more money in people's pockets, and they're able to take that money and invest it into things that matter to them, whether it be the environment or food sustainability or food waste, for instance. And the other thing I will mention is a lot of people, they mention, why am I being punished? I'm a good Samaritan. My carbon footprint is very low. Why don't you go after the big players? And our response to that in our environmental plan is yes. We're going after the big players. If you look at our emission reductions fund, instead of going after the mom and pop shops that are trying to do everything they can to stay afloat, whether it's a new business model like introducing takeaway containers that are recyclable or bring your own container, frankly, those things are happening on the ground, and we're supporting those things to happen. But they can't maintain it if they're being taxed again. They have to close the door on their local business if they have to pay too much electricity costs or carbon tax, and all those good Samaritan things that they want to do for their local business model, they can't sustain because they're going to be closing their doors. So that's why we create a practical solution, a solution that says, look, we're not going to be taxing people for getting ahead. We are going to go after the big polluters. And we are going to make sure that the big polluters, they do pay. And they are going to pay into the emission reductions fund. And that will help us towards a lot of technology. I know a lot of members opposite, they haven't come up with a lot of solutions, but in our environmental plan, a lot of the solutions we are talking about is getting digital. We're in the 21st century. We should be able to allow Ontarians to see what real-time monitoring on their cell phones. So we're going digital. A lot of those investments we're going to be making from the Carbon Trust or the emission reductions funds is the way Ontarians can come together, feel like they're also feel the sustainability that they're creating with investing in this fund and investing in new technology. But I can go on and on, Madam Speaker, because we have so many solutions and so many actions in our environmental plan, and we're still consulting on all the details as well. So I will end by passing over to the next speaker, but I will say we're very proud of this environmental plan. It doesn't just speak action; it speaks truth. Madam Speaker, thank you.